you all have together accomplished is extraordinary, and something that we want to carry not only more deeply and more widely in California, but really across the country. And I want to just say a few things about that today. As John said, it was just about 5 years ago that we hatched the idea for the ILC. One of the things that was going on at that time was that California in 2010 had adopted the Common Core state standards, and then shortly thereafter the Next Generation Science Standards. And many, many states across the country were doing that. And you might recall, if you're old enough, that there was a little bit of fracas around the Common Core in the country. It wasn't quite so easy as people thought it might be when they first dreamed up the idea. And there was concern among, the people who'd sort of gotten the Common Core going and adopted and funded about how would the Common Core roll out in California. What had happened in some other states, and maybe the best poster child for the opposing strategy would be New York, where I spent some time with John before we both came to California. In New York, the way the Common Core rolled out was immediately tied to a high-stakes test. The test hadn't actually been even field tested or vetted. It was being used to close schools if they didn't achieve high enough targets, to evaluate and fire teachers and determine pay in some cases, to decide which kids would get promoted from one grade to the other. Very serious sanctions, punitive consequences attached to the test, attached to the standards. Pretty soon people didn't like the Common Core state standards very much in New York because it had gotten embroiled in this very punitive approach to accountability, very little support for teachers. It was really viewed as a hammer, not as a lever for achieving greater things in your teaching, and eventually rejected in the state. In California, we had taken a different approach. The Governor Jerry Brown set aside most of the old CSTs. I don't know if you remember, we used to have about 60% more tests than we have today. There was a moratorium on testing for a few years as Smarter Balanced was beginning to get designed and brought on board. The sanctions that had been associated with testing under the API were being set aside, and a new framework was being evolved. And the question of how could we take advantage of these standards in a way that would be productive was on the table. One of the kinds of conversations that was going on was, well, maybe among some of the funders and so on was, well, maybe we need a communications campaign so that people will see advertisements about the Common Core and want to do it. And I was in one of those conversations and said, if we really want the Common Core to be accepted and well implemented and used productively, we need to put it in the hands of teachers. And that's what the ILC is all about. We put it in the hands of teachers. And the rest is history in some sense. There's a lot of work to do. You've done a lot of work. There's more work ahead of us. But meanwhile, in this new context in California, we have seen tremendous strides. We put out a report this week called The California Way, which kind of documents what California's been doing over recent years, and the ILC is a very big piece of that story. But in 2010 and 2011, when this started, California was at the very bottom, not only of funding, but of achievement. Eighth graders scored 45th, 48th, and 49th, respectively, on reading, science, and math on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. A lot of work has been done to bring in these new standards and new strategies for teaching. We're now almost at the national average for eighth graders in reading. We're just about a point away. And just over that period of time, that's how much gain has happened. And we've closed the distance in math for 8th graders to the national average in half, and we're on a trajectory. And you should take some credit for the gains that are being made in this state to really put in place a new approach to teaching and learning. We had to move, as some of you know, and you've experienced this, from scripted curriculum that left teachers with no decision making, and it was a very transmission-oriented curriculum, all the way over to the shifts in instruction that you're working on for critical thinking and problem solving and inquiry in the classroom and kids engaged and collaborating. And that would not, where we are now, which is on the journey and making progress, wouldn't have happened without the work that you have done. So we just did at the Learning Policy Institute, which is the organization I founded a few years ago to help take evidence into policy. We just finished a study. You are seeing the pre-release version. It's literally hot off the press. I think like yesterday, it might still be warm to the touch. It's called the Instructional Leadership Corps, Entrusting Professional Learning in the Hands of the Profession. That's you. Yes. I want to recognize the lead authors on this study. Where is Rachel Lotan? And stand up, and Dion Burns. Who traveled all over the state to, the 4 regions of the state to help us understand several things. We wanted to understand what the ILC is doing, why it is getting such rave reviews from teachers. We have seen the evaluations that our friends at SCOPE have been collecting over the last few years. As you undoubtedly know, on the 5-point Likert scale that teachers use to rate the workshops and the experiences that you all have, it's almost always well above 4.5 and sometimes all the way to 5. I mean, people love the work that is going on here and profit from it. So we wanted to understand why that's happening. And also, how are some of the ILC efforts really taking deep root in schools and districts, in county offices, in universities, connecting people across the region and growing, much more than just that, initial set of professional development workshops. This work has been fostered not only by all of you in the field, but I want to recognize our SCOPE team, John Snyder, Melissa Gilbert, and Jakewith, Alethea Andre, and our National Board Resource Center leader, Linda Bald, for all the work that they've been putting into this. And then, of course, at the CTA, where this has been nurtured and fostered and planted and watered and grown, and in particular, Becky Zogelman and Marlene Fong, and there's so many others that we need to recognize as well. Norma Sanchez, and there's probably about 10 other people I need to name, but I just be a proxy for all of your colleagues because so many people have contributed to this. So I want to just tell you a little bit in the few minutes that I have about what we found in this study. As you well know, one of the things that's so important about the Instructional Leadership Corps is that it changes the paradigm for teacher learning from the drive-by, spray and pray, one-shot workshop brought in by a vendor who does a PowerPoint after school and then leaves. And you've probably all experienced that. There was a cartoon that came up recently on the web that I had seen when I was teaching many years ago, which says, I hope that when I pass on to the next, dimension, I'll do it from a professional development workshop because I'll already be so close to transitioning to the other side. That notion of the deadening experience. So the ILC has developed a strategy where, of course, you learn ways to get to the core of the instructional shifts, that are embedded in the standards, the strategies teachers are sharing with each other, both among the leadership corps itself and then in the schools and districts where you offer professional development workshops. Teachers have the opportunity then to see those shifts, to work on some curriculum and lessons and figure out how to plant that in their classrooms. And then guess what? The ILC members are still there in the district to ask questions of and to continue to have the dialogue and to foster communications between and among teaching teams, planning teams, and individual classrooms, and then come back together and problem solve and look at what happened and share strategies. And that's how we build expertise in the profession. But beyond the individual school, what we're seeing now is that schools are sharing across schools. So this school gets something going, and they're on a mission, and they're succeeding, and the other school hears about it and says, "Oh, we'd like to see what you're doing." And so that now is getting shared. And then the districts are engaging in many cases to bring the ILC into the district system of professional learning. And we see districts learning from each other. We looked at 4 different places where this was going on. As you know, the ILC, the hardy little band of a couple of hundred ILC corps members has reached over 100,000 teachers in California. With this form of professional development, which has many of the features of effective professional development. We did another study where we looked at what kind of professional development actually supports changes in teaching practice and changes in student achievement. We found 35 programs that had that effect, and we found out that all of them had teachers collaborating with each other. They had teachers engaged in active learning and applying things in the classroom, and then they had opportunities for reflection. They had opportunities for coaching and teacher-to-teacher sharing, and they had a long enough duration. It's not, flavor of the month, but we keep working on it over time and deepening the practice. So what you've developed has all of those features of effective professional development. And we looked at 4 places where it had taken root in very interesting ways. In Madeira Unified School District. Is anybody here from Madeira? All right. Where the district serves largely Latina students with varying levels of English proficiency, and the ILC focused on language development across the curriculum. Conejo Valley Unified. Is anybody here from? All right. Where they decided to really work on building science competencies and trying to do that in a vertical alignment across the curriculum and aligning instruction within the schools as well, and moving to inquiry-based science in a serious way. The East Side Alliance from East Side Union High School District and its feeders. Is anybody here from San Jose? Come on, you can do better than that. And, of course, there we have teams from multiple elementary districts and the high school district working together. Now, that takes a lot of social and emotional intelligence, so I think we really need to salute the collaboration that is represented in that alliance of districts and teams. And then there's the group of ILC leaders in North Orange County and that work with Cal State Fullerton. Any of those folks here? All right. And they invented something entirely new. They work across a wide range of districts. There was a little trouble initially figuring out how to get a toehold into the district process. So they came together across districts and started to work with the College of Education, and now have a series of teachers teaching teachers conferences that are focused on the instructional shifts in the standards. That then led to a new effort for mentoring programs for both beginning teachers and high school students interested in teaching, so building a pipeline of teachers. So what the ILC has planted is growing in lots of interesting and different ways to build the expertise and the sharing of expertise in the profession, which is what a profession is about, right? A profession is about sharing a body of knowledge that we act on in the best interests of our students. You know, the moral ethic of a profession combined with the knowledge base of the profession, which for all of us goes beyond what we have experienced ourselves and what we've learned individually to what we can learn in collaboration with each other and build a stronger, broader, more useful knowledge base. So we saw all kinds of great work going on in the workshops and beyond. In Eastside's Mount Pleasant district, one of the middle school teachers was talking about the math work. How many folks here are from the math part of the ILC? Come on, math. The math people, I don't know what it is. If I had said that about English language arts, what would I get? I was an English teacher. The math people are so contained, reserved. But we're about growth mindset in math, right? We're about loving math. We're about helping kids see that they can be good at math. We're about, yes. So one of the teachers said, my students are more engaged. They love the math block. They love collaborating more. They love basically the different strategies I've used from the ILC workshops. They're having more of a growth mindset when it comes to math. They come in previous years, they come into the classroom saying, I can't do math. It's not my thing. How many of you have heard that? We've all heard that from someone. But once I've implemented so many different strategies and number talks are going crazy across the state of California, and collaboration that we've learned, they become more receptive. My students are helping each other, they're collaborating, they're working as a group. 2 years ago, none of that was really happening within the classroom. And we heard stories like that in science and in math and in English language arts. And one of the administrators in Madeira actually made a similar point. He said, here's the thing that's a real tipping point for me. I was seeing the evidence, but what I heard from the teachers was, and this gets me a little passionate, they heard kids say things like, I felt smart today. That's a huge thing to hear a kid say. When a 7th grader who's not doing well in school tells you they felt smart today, it's because somebody taught them how to feel smart today, right? That's what you're doing all across the state of California. And I think what we saw in the teacher leaders is that a growing sense that we can work in our own classrooms, we can work in our own schools, we can work in our own districts, but we can go beyond. We can build the connections across the state and across our field, across our profession. One of them noted, maybe one of you if you recognize this quote, the ILC for me has been about how we can carry not the same exact ideas, but that same passion and belief that we can do better. When you get caught up in how my school is doing or how my district is doing, we forget that it's a larger stage, that we're not just here for this small group. We have to impact as many as possible if we're true educators. And I know you live by that mantra in the ILC. So one of the things that has been fascinating is how teachers are learning to engage with district leaders, with county leaders, with higher education leaders around this. And we see a variety of strategies that the ILC can not only grow in California, but also in other states where teachers, leading teachers, can be equally helpful. We found that, of course, teachers value professional learning led by their colleagues. Teachers say that over and over and over again. Of course, you know what it's like to be in the classroom. You often know the same kids. You know the same context. And you have the tools to help your colleagues in ways that are very contextually appropriate and rooted. that ILC members and engagement in the ILC enhances the sense of efficacy that teachers have about the fact that they can change things for kids and change the context in their district, change the way the district thinks about teaching and learning as well. We saw that the kinds of structural arrangements that some districts are putting in place really make a difference. Obviously, those include time for teachers to collaborate. We've got a lot more work to do on that in the state, but it is something that's beginning to happen. Opportunities for that collaboration, teachers being able to go see each other's classrooms, analyze the work of their students. When those structures are put in place to allow for that, there's huge uptake. Systematic follow-up obviously matters, whether that is teachers' verbal and written reflections with their colleagues, their opportunities to debrief what they've done in the classroom, and then working with principals and district leaders to design for a long-range engagement for an ongoing, deeper relationship between and among teachers in doing this work together. So I want to just congratulate and celebrate you and the work that you're doing. It's important in your district, it's important in your region, it's important in the state, and it's going to be important as we carry this forward in the United States of America. Thank you.